when the Dryad poured her fury and hate into the jungle, turning it wild and deadly. Many of the once placid species that lived there perished. Those that remained struggled and fought for survival within their hostile new environment. As there always was though, there was one that thrived, spreading their influence throughout their changed home, relishing the combative new world that now surrounded them. Surveying her new thorn-ridden kingdom, the queen bee believed herself to be invincible, but little did she know that others looked upon her throne with great desire, and her downfall would come from much closer than she had ever expected. Gods had begun. Humanity had all players deep and challenging, different is less likely to get me horribly In a time of peace before the coming of the great cosmic scourges, the jungle was home to a wide and assorted array of creatures. Natural selection of course played its role, with the cycle of life and death continuing as it would anywhere else. But here the animals did not wish to engage in violence unless absolutely necessary. That was other than a species of flying insect, the common bee. Through millennia of evolution, they had become highly defensive, displaying great aggression to anyone who neared their hives. It was hardly uncalled for, however, for over the tens of thousands of years, the supposedly benevolent creatures of the world had repeatedly raided the bees' homes for the nutritious honey that lay within. Each time this happened, the hives were greatly damaged, sometimes beyond repair, and large swaths of the bees' population died of starvation, their own food source having been stolen. In time they became aggressive to anything that ventured close to their hives, even if it didn't mean them any harm. The survivors began to develop defences against their enemies, first to a fierce stingist stab at interlopers, driving them off. Then came poison to ensure that they never returned, and finally the ability to fire these poison stingers to make sure no one even got close to them. But even with all this weaponry, the hungry and brave still tore open their hives, taking the precious honey for themselves. The many predators even started to develop defences of their own, thick hides and carapaces to deflect the stinging jabs of the bees, and the hives were barely able to hang on, forced to fight every day for their very survival. Then a miracle came, considered a curse by every other creature of the jungle. Vines began to grow voraciously, entangling the animals of the jungle and shredding them with razor-sharp thorns. Although for the bees, these vines became impenetrable fortifications that encased their hives, making them safe. The bees themselves were small enough to fly through the gaps in the vines, but nimble enough to avoid the vines' attempts to ensnare them. In these shells of hive and thorn, while the world outside fell apart, the bees busied themselves, as they always had, with the growth of their hive. Only now there was nothing to stop them, and they dug into the dirt of the jungle floor, expanding their hives to sizes unheard of by any who had come before them. Without the threat of predators stealing their food, the queen gorged herself on royal jelly and grew large and bloated. Despite their newfound individual prosperity, the thorn walls separated the hives, and they grew apart from each other, a separate queen taking control of each of the great hives. At long last, even the huge jungle hives could not support their populations, and whole communities of bees were forced out to form homes of their own. Upon breaking divine barriers, however, the queens learned of each other's existence. Every one of them believed it was their destiny to conquer the other hives, and unify the bees as they once had been. Naturally, this led to growing tensions between the hives, and soon a war broke out. Dozens of hives pitted against each other as the now mutated and fierce jungle animals fed on the resultant fallout. Millions of bees were killed, and despite their newfound strength, they were once more on the cusp of extinction. Whenever a queen gained the upper hand and took control of another hive, a competitor would inevitably rise up in one of her domains and wrestle control of it. This, it turned out, was the curse of the bees, but a single queen could only ever control one hive at a time, and could never ally with another, lest they destroy each other. In the end, a tentative truce was declared among the hives, agreeing that each queen had the rights to self-governance, and to grow their own territory without limit. To this day, the hives continue to expand, with breakaway groups continually attempting to found their own territory, and yet the population is still a shadow of what it had once been. In time, their numbers may recover, and separate hives may even merge, growing to such an extent that it threatens to encompass the majority of the jungle itself. It may be that a single empress bee rises to rule if this comes to pass, or it may be that the factions descend back into their chaos and war, dooming their kind to eternal oblivion. Whatever happens, it would seem the bees are poised to become a serious threat to the jungle and beyond, ensuring the destruction of everything they touch before finally completing their own annihilation. It is with a heavy heart then that the champion of Terraria and other warriors brave enough to venture into the jungle must seek to destroy the queens before they are able to complete their kamikaze course to extinction. After all, the only thing the bees ever wanted was to protect their homes, and now that very urge may lead to their ultimate demise. Hey everybody, I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, feel free to leave a like and subscribe so you'll be the first to know about my future videos. And don't forget, I've got a Patreon and merch store. I think that's about it, so have a great day and I'll see you later.